Thank you so much for joining us today for the kickoff, or as we like to say in the ship world, Sailaway, of our Women's History Month series. I'm so delighted to welcome Ariana J. Tadler, SHIP's first ever guest speaker. Ariana, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be part of this really exciting launch for you all. And I'm really humbled that you asked me to be here today.
I'm just so glad that we met. I'm going to tell that story in a little bit. And so just for everyone watching on the call, I'm going to do a short introduction of Ariana, and then we're going to get into a little bit of a discussion about how you, Ariana, are making history. And we're going to talk about one of your favorite role models, Amanda Gorman, and how she's making history. So for everyone listening, Ariana is one of the leading plaintiffs litigators in the country with over 30 years of experience litigating large, complex, high-profile cases. She's a founder and managing partner of Tadler Law, a woman-owned WBENC certified boutique law firm that focuses on representing consumers, investors, and businesses in complex and class action litigation nationwide. In addition to being a lawyer, Ariana is also an entrepreneur. In 2015, she's co-founded Meta eDiscovery, a leading e-discovery consulting and technology firm. In 2017, Ariana was appointed by United States Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts to serve on the Federal Civil Rules Advisory Committee. She's now in her second term, serving on the Social Security, multi-district litigation, and discovery subcommittees. Ariana speaks regularly on litigation and discovery-related topics and serves as a guest lecturer at law schools, teaching students practical skills to prepare them for the real-life practice of law. In summary, Ariana is a lawyer, entrepreneur, mother, mentor, lifelong learner, and a champion for women and minorities. She's been described by her colleagues as a super smart, commercial, down-to-earth, natural leader fueled by incredible communication skills and the ability to see the best in people and draw out the best in folks together as a team. And I can also, sidebar, I can attest to Ariana being a champion for women because we met at a January National Speakers Association New York City chapter meeting, and I got up in front of everybody and asked the group to follow SHIP on LinkedIn so we could get 150 followers so we could start doing our summits and start our LinkedIn lives. And a bunch of people signed up today, but you in particular came up to me after the meeting and we had a quick call and you were like, I love the idea, what you're doing. I want to find out more. And you graciously spent 30 minutes on a Zoom with me and agreed to be our first guest speaker. So thank you so much. I'm so glad we met when we did.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. Well, let's jump in and talk a little bit about your career.
Sure.
So I read that you decided you wanted to be a lawyer at age 13. Could you tell us a little bit about that story?
Sure. I grew up in a family where dinner at the table was required. Everybody had to stop. Of course, we didn't have technology like cell phones and laptops and all of that way back then. And we would sit around the table and there would be engaging discussion. Our parents expected that of us. And we were really expected to contribute substantively to whatever the topic was. And if we didn't have the substance behind us, it really was not appropriate to just kind of, riff or spitball. That was not what that dialogue was supposed to be. And my parents also had a really interesting and wide net of friends and colleagues that often would visit and have dinner with us. And that would always be engaging. And their friends are very diverse. And so that was also helpful. And when I was, I guess about somewhere between 13 and 15, I actually took a trip to Haiti. My parents took us there and really saw poverty for the first time in such realistic, existence. And that led me to further refine my desire to not only be an advocate, an oral advocate, a good speaker, somebody who was persuasive, also to be thinking about how does the law work and what can we do to make this world a better place.
Got it. And then I know one of the core components of your company's philosophy is diversity and inclusion. And I did a little bit of research and learned that when you became a lawyer, when you started your career, 20% of lawyers were women. This number has improved because I also found out that in 2022, 38% of lawyers are women and 50% of law school students are women. I'm curious to know what it was like to you to start your career at the time that you did and how it's affected your approach to your company today.
So interestingly, I did not feel in the minority while I was in law school. I'm a Fordham Law School alum, a very proud alum. And I would say that when I looked at my classmates, I felt that there were just as many women as there were men in my law school class.
Mm.
What I did find, though, of course, is once we went out into practice and the fact that I had chosen to be a litigator, that was where you started seeing a real differential in the numbers. And it was not unusual for me to be the only woman in the room. And that has continued to remain true even now. There are times when I walk into the room and I still may be the only woman. And certainly, I would say back when I was in law school, and most significantly when I started practicing, we didn't see a lot of diverse people from different ethnic backgrounds either. We're obviously seeing improvement there. I think the statistics that you've shared are really interesting because, yes, those statistics are talking about, I think you said 30+% of women now practicing law. I would be really interested to know what are the stats from, let's say, 2017, 18, and 19 versus 2022, because we do know that quite a number of women stepped away from their careers during the pandemic. And I actually have published about that. I wrote a piece for the Women Law Advocate through the ABA about the fact that women really do need to set some boundaries in order to be able to protect their entire persona, their holistic selves. Many women stepped away from their careers because there were so many obligations at home, especially in those locations where people were under lockdown. And then the question becomes, how many of those women came back into their careers? How many women came back into the practice of law? I've seen a lot of women that I should say, I'm not seeing some of the women that I saw before the pandemic because I know that they have pulled back a little bit. And then again, I'm seeing a lot of new faces, which is really wonderful. And I think there are a lot of women who now are stepping back in and leaning in, and maybe, again, new people. And then the question is, where are we with the people who were with us 2019, early 2020? If they haven't come back, are they going to come back? And how does that skew the numbers?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really interesting question. And I almost wonder, slightly off topic, like what's happening in the US politically, how that's affected the number of women deciding to become lawyers and enter politics. And so my reference is like, I used to work at an engineering firm with a lot of software engineers, and a lot of them said that there was a scene in Apollo 13 that made them want to be engineers. And it's the scene where everybody gets in the room and they dump everything that's on the space shuttle onto the table and they go, we have to make a filter using only these materials, and then I also read a piece that said a lot of women actually were inspired to become doctors because of Dr. Dana Scully from X-Files.
Oh, interesting.
Which I think is really interesting. So those are very, and now I'm very curious to set up a meeting with the New York Public Library research team and see if we can find out those answers, if those statistics exist.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that another really important positive development has been when I started practicing law in the 90s, there were so few women litigating that we were basically pushed into a competition, right? There was only going to be one seat. And so we were kind of vying for positions. Quite frankly, I never felt that I was vying for a position. I'm a very naturally collaborative person. And yet I found that there were women that I had encountered at the time that I felt maybe I was being elbowed a little bit. And I feel that we've made a big shift where women have awakened and see that we are our best allies. We are our best sponsors. And even when women who make some kind of announcement that would create further competition for me or for my firm, or with respect to whether I'm going to land a particular opportunity, I still celebrate them. If you watch me on LinkedIn, I celebrate women all the time, including women who are my competitors, including women who were my former partners, because we have to do that. We have to do that.
I agree. I mean, that's why we formed SHIP. We were like, we're stronger together than we are apart.
Yes.
and we're all here supporting each other. And there's a quote, and I don't remember who says it, but I think the quote is, there's a special place, and sorry, I'm going to curse, there's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
100% believe it. I have a question about boundaries, and I'm going to ask that after. I'm really
Sure.
curious, how did you get into litigation?
I think a lot of it goes back to, again, growing up in a family where
Mm,
there was dialogue and there was debate, and having to be a persuasive advocate. I also love to write. I really love to write, and persuasive pieces, or pieces that will inspire somebody, or will instill in them, this opportunity to think a little bit harder, a
mm,
little bit more broadly. And so, obviously, to be a good litigator, you have to be a great oral advocate, and you have to be a really good writer. And
mm,
most significantly, which is the overarching piece, is you have to be a great communicator. And I also think that I bring a unique set of skills to the practice of litigation, in that, yes, litigation, you have parties that are fighting, they are adverse to each other. And yet, I have made a very deliberate choice over the last 30 years to come to the table with my adversaries in a very gracious, inviting, inclusive, collaborative, cooperative way.
mm.
Because yes, we can fight to the death about the issues. That's our job to some extent. I don't think you have to fight to the death, by the way.
Right.
But we still are human beings. And so,
Mhm,
again, the overarching theme for me has been to be a great communicator. And that's one of the reasons why I regularly speak about connectivity,
mm,
how important it is that we connect with human beings. You could have an adversary who suddenly calls you and says, listen, I know my deadline is today for something. I've had something happen. Talk to me. You're a human being. I'm a human being. I
mhm.
have kids. I have a husband. I have a family.
Yeah.
Things happen. And so, better to be gracious. And I also believe that,
Mhm.
what comes around goes around, or what goes around
Yeah.
comes around, either however you want to go. It's really important that we start from a place really that's anchored, I say, in love, anchored in hope,
Mhm,
anchored in goodness. And when we do that, when we start our day that way, we're going to be successful.
mhm. That is such, I feel like I'm very inspired by what you just said. And I'm not a litigator. I've never been in a courtroom in that capacity, but I can relate to the concept of having adversaries, but at the poker table. I play a lot of poker, and
Great.
I'm really good friends with a lot of the women I play poker with, and we play very aggressively. Do you know, like, we all want to win, but we are kind about it, and
Yes.
we're polite about it, and it's like we'll be very aggressive at the poker table, and once we're off the poker table, it's like it didn't even, like nothing ever happened. And I think that's the way we need to. Do you know what I mean? Like, kind of do
Yes.
everything where it's like, yes. And I also find that sometimes when you feel like someone is competition, they kind of push you to be a little bit better. And I've learned the most from people who had differing opinions than I do. I learned the most from them.
Well, we
Um,
welcome that,
yeah,
right? Don't
yeah,
don't we want to see the various opinions and perspectives that people have? I always find
mm,
I'm an avid learner. I like to hear somebody else's story. I've done a fair amount of work, whether it's independent reading or coursework. I just finished a phenomenal course with Mitra Manesh, who teaches a mindfulness curriculum at UCLA. And just, how do we engage with people? How do we make sure that we are hearing, we're listening to the other side? And there's a great book also by the Arbinger Institute called Leadership and Self-Deception. Are you living
oh,
in the box, or are you living outside the box? If you're living in the box, you've cornered yourself into one perspective. You,
mm,
you believe only that which you know, or which you believe to know,
mhm,
because there's bias happening in what you believe to know. Whereas if you push open one of those walls and invite somebody in, or even better, step out of the box and see them, you're actually
mm,
going to learn a lot. And I will tell you, as a strategy for somebody who's an advocate, That's a really key strategy. For example, there's a great author and speaker, Alexandra Carter. She also goes by Alex Carter. She's written a book, Ask for More. And she talks about that. Like when you engage with people and you invite them in, or you come to where they are, the likelihood is you're going to learn a lot, which will then better anchor you for whatever it is you're trying to achieve.
I really like that approach. I'm at a loss for words, actually. I'm going to be honest with you, everyone watching, lost for words. So I'm just going to let that sit, because I feel like, I know the chat is just flying down with everybody just making comments about what you just said. So we'll let that sit. And I know you mentioned boundaries before. And do you have any advice? And I know we have a lot of folks, and we've talked a lot on the Ship LinkedIn Lives about imposter syndrome and fear and failure, and trying to do everything all at once. Do you have any advice for folks on how to set and keep boundaries?
So I'll start with, yes, I have a lot of ideas.
Okay.
And I will also do a full disclaimer that at times, many a time, I'm a hypocrite. So I'll just put that out there. Okay. I am definitely somebody who is constantly striving for the best and is constantly doing more and offering more and volunteering more. And the truth of the matter is, boundaries require us to know when to say no, to better manage our time. I have now hired a team of people to help me better manage my time. That sounds kind of nuts, right? Like practicing 30 years, multiple businesses. I just also started a new business where I'm doing some investment work, and I have all these lines happening. And then of course I have my great sons and my husband and my extended family. And where is it that you make the time for yourself? So I can tell you a couple of hacks that I do have. I wake up every morning. The first thing I do is pray. It's the first thing that I do. It takes 5 minutes and I do it. And I know other people meditate. This is something that's an easy go-to for me, and it serves two purposes. In some ways, it's like meditation, and also it's serving my soul and my faith. I also wear a device. I'm not going to sponsor any device on your show. I wear a device to help me track how I sleep and where is my heart rate and where is, some of the other stats that can help me know, the reason you didn't feel so good, whatever day, is because you actually worked until 1 o'clock in the morning, which sometimes I have a habit of doing when my husband's not around. And also, maybe you had dinner at 9 o'clock or even 8 o'clock. I have a friend who wears one of these devices. Her key period to eat is 4 to 5 p.m. Now, I can't imagine that. That to me is like lunchtime. However, I've come to realize that, I need to scale back on making sure that I'm eating at some kind of consistent hour. I'm eating responsibly, trying to get exercise in for sure. This is one of the things I'm constantly talking to my boy men sons, which I shared with you. So my sons are in their 20s. They're in the working world now. They work very hard. And I will ask them, hey, so did you get outside today? Did you get some fresh air? Did you move? Did you move out of your chair? Again, hypocrite, because there are times I don't. And they themselves are struggling with it. So I think it's where you've got to bring in a tribe. And one of the great things that I learned from a speaker that I had listened to, probably like 9 months ago, is that we need to have, the word was accomplice. I don't like the word accomplice because I think it has a derogatory tone to it. We need to have people who will keep us honest. And so I have a phenomenal executive assistant, Malik, who will say, like, ping, Ariana, you've been in that seat for 4 hours. Can we do XYZ? And I have a best friend. I have my husband. I have a lot of people around me where sometimes I have to say to them, I'm really struggling. in not
Mhm.
finding time for myself. Can you please help me by
Mm.
pulling me out, forcing me to do some of the things that I go out and espouse about? When I'm good, I block my calendar.
Mhm.
Um, Over the last number of months, we have now put in what we call buffers. So
Mm.
I don't want to be on back-to-back calls. I do not want to be on back-to-back calls, especially
Mhm.
when it's speaking to one client, now talking about a speaking engagement because I do a lot of professional and keynote speaking, then doing something for Meta E, then, or even client, let's say it was client to client for Tadler Law. You need a breath. You need to
Mhm.
get your head around, well, what's the next conversation? That client's case is completely different. And maybe
Yeah.
you need to be revved up, or maybe you need to be much calmer and thoughtful and in listening mode. Um,
Mm.
I think some of the things, honestly, Anne, are pretty obvious, right? We need to sleep.
Yeah.
We need to eat. We should eat. We
Mhm.
should try to eat healthily, and not just from takeout.
Right.
We need to exercise.
Mhm.
We need to breathe. I will
Mhm.
tell you, I am also a fan and a user of some apps to stop and even for 1 minute
Mm.
breathe. And sometimes it's box breathing. Sometimes it's just, inhale in 9, exhale out for 12, whatever your choice is, whatever works. I don't suggest that you use my numbers because if you haven't done it yet, that might be too long. I don't want you passing out on the floor. I will
Yeah.
tell you what they say is true. When you are in survivalist mode, where you feel like everything is binary, yes, no, black, white, breathe. Take a minute to breathe. Get your heart rate
Mm.
down. You will go from survivalist mode to choice mode. You will zoom out and start looking at what are the choices. And I cannot take credit for that philosophy. It comes directly from Mitra Manesh.
Mm. This is all incredible. I mean, and I agree with you. Sometimes I'm a hypocrite too, and I don't do my self-care, but sleep, eating well, exercise, creating space for yourself, and breathing, and getting a really great team and accountability partners to keep you honest.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think also, you know, sit down with a pen and a piece of paper, whether it's literally that kind of journal or you have some kind of
Mhm.
tablet that you are writing. There are studies that
Mm.
say your writing makes a difference. It connects with your brain differently. And I would say, write down what are the things that bring you joy? What are some of the things that you want to do or you used to do? And how might you incorporate one of them? So I'll give you an example for one. I love music. I've always loved music. My youngest son is in the music industry and has been singing since he was basically born. I suddenly woke up one day and realized I had not listened to music other than in the car for years. And I thought, how did that happen? I used to go to sleep in high school, college, and law school with a headset on. Obviously, it was a Walkman. So anyway, I'm dating myself. And so now I have a Bluetooth speaker. I chose that I really loved, and I turn music on sometimes while I'm working, sometimes in the morning. And you know what? Yeah, I'm singing. I'm singing around the
Mm.
room. I'm singing in the shower just to bring those endorphins up because that's something that brings me joy.
Mm.
That is really really good advice. And I see the chat kind of going, and I'm going to watch this back and take notes with everything that you just said to incorporate. Let's actually spend some time because I want to make sure we talk about your role model, Amanda Gorman.
Yeah.
And so a little bit about Amanda Gorman for folks. She is the youngest inaugural poet in U.S. history, the first U.S. National Youth Poet Laureate, an award-winning writer, Harvard University graduate, and the founder of a nonprofit organization. She's performed at the White House, the Library of Congress, Lincoln Center, and CBS This Morning. She's also an activist who focuses on the issues of oppression, race, feminism, and marginalization. And I'm curious, Ariana, what was the catalyst for choosing Amanda as your role model for today's call?
So I think when we women are asked for role models, and especially for those of us who are of a certain age,
Mhm.
everybody expects us to look back deeply into history.
Mhm.
And there are lots of other women. Sometimes I'm asked to give, 5 names. I can think of people, of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, huge inspiration.
RBG.
Exactly. Who's had some of the most phenomenal quotes ever, and her dry wit was overwhelmingly inclusive and also just went right for the jugular. And I love that about her. I just saw a piece that was just posted with Jane Fonda being interviewed about why are women's friendships so important. I urge you all to just go ahead and Google or you, whatever your search engine is, use your search engine and find this. I saw it on Instagram, and her answer to that was, why are women's friendships so important? It was a one-word answer: health. Powerful, really powerful, right? So why Amanda Gorman? Because when you asked the question for me to think on it, I started thinking about how there is a lot of frustration and struggle and disappointment and depression and anxiety for our nation and for the world. And it's related to what happened with the pandemic. It's relating to where our country is economically, politically, environmentally. We can play all of that out. Okay. Amanda Gorman stood up that day at the inauguration, and within the first 2 sentences, I had goosebumps. The fact that this woman could be so young and could write something that was so inspiring, substantive, deep. I mean, she to me is a very old soul. It's as if she's living yet another life from learning that she's had before. And one of the things that people don't know is that she actually reportedly, I'm not her doctor, all I can do is based on research I've done, she reportedly has certain speech articulation challenges, and such that it's difficult for her to pronounce certain words. And it's just hard for me to imagine that she has those challenges, because if you go and listen to her reading of her poem, which is available in a book, it's as if she's singing. And the messaging is intense. The words are strong. And she was completely unnerved for a young person to be in a place like that. And she continues to inspire people by her writing. I love watching her whenever she is, out in public. She's on some people's shows. Sometimes she's at public events. There is an aura about her. I just want to be part of that aura. It's so inviting. And to me, it's encouraging to me, because I think a lot of people say things about our youth that is negative. We can't do that. We can't do that. When we say things, we put that into the universe. We have to encourage young people. And here's a woman who's young, who she sees the light. She sees the light, and she's going to be the light. Right?
Yeah, I read up on Amanda for this call specifically, and she and I actually share the same speech impediment. As when I was younger, I had a lot of problems saying my R's, and that's reportedly what she also has. But I also thought it was interesting too, is he's mentioned that she doesn't hold back, and I read about how she sort of led up to writing the inaugural poem. She treated every poem that she wrote like it was for an inauguration. She, like she didn't hold back and think, oh, maybe I'll do this later, or I'll push myself later. I'm going to treat everything like it's the most important thing I've ever done.
Yes.
And that experience, brought her to speak at the inauguration. And I also was reminded this story too, because I know Jill Biden invited Amanda to speak, and I actually thought of you and the mentoring that you're doing, and even the mentoring of me. Like when we met at the meeting, and you were like, I'm really interested in CHIP, and you got really excited about it, and you were like the first person outside of our group and outside of Innovation Women to say that, and it meant so much for me. And I sort of related Jill Biden and you in that sense. So that was my little.
Well, that's a huge honor, and I thank you for that. have felt so strongly throughout my life about mentorship. And I'm going to add to that in a minute. So I do a lot of mentoring. I mentor people who are in high school. I don't even have children in high school. I mentor people in high school in our local town. It's the high school where I went. It's where my children went. Our children went. There are children that, even though you might be living in a suburban town and you think, well, that's a life of privilege, there are children who are going through that programming. They are not thriving for whatever reason. It could be their family circumstances, their economic circumstances. They may have their own personal struggles. And so I have always found that I garner great joy in helping high school students, college students, law students, young lawyers. And then I wanted to add to the mentorship. So I had always focused on that mentor word. And then I'm a member of Chief. And we've been talking a lot about, well, what's the difference between being a mentor, a sponsor, and an ally? They are different.
Yes.
They are different. And now I've realized just how intentional I am about sponsoring other women, putting my name behind them, saying, oh, yes, call this person, use my name, say, I said, please call, right? Because I find that is aligned with my core values of human connectivity. And then the allyship, I think this is an area where women have really grown, and they have more growing to do. How do we make sure that we're aligned? We're not always, pushing one or supporting the other. Rather, sometimes it's just being there. Sometimes it's being a sounding board. Sometimes it's giving advice, although I would suggest to all of us, let's listen first. Let's ask questions. Maybe somebody's not asking for advice. They're simply asking for you to listen because they need their feelings validated, or they need to say out loud what they're thinking to go through their own process, right? And so I love ship because all of those words, it's mentorship, it's sponsorship, it's allyship, right?
Yeah, we talk a lot about mentorship, allyship, sponsorship, leadership, ownership, and even fellowship, right? And that sense of community as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you what my favorite quote is from Amanda Gorman, at least for today. It changes because I do have quite a number. And this was from the inauguration. It's, there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. And that, to me, is completely aligned with my core values.
Do you know that's the quote I picked too? Just in case you asked me what my favorite quote was.
Well, I'm glad. I'm so glad. And that speaks to me that's, where your core value is, one of your core values. And the other thing is, just as I said it, I got chills again. It's a new day. What more can we do? What can we see as a positive future for all of us? And what can we do about it?
Well, I think that is a perfect ending to our call. We're going to wrap everything up because we're slightly over time. Ariana, thank you so much for spending your time with us today and for all just chatting with us about your career and boundary setting and your role model, Amanda Gorman. And for everybody out there, listen first, ask questions later, provide space for yourself and others, and be the light. I guess that's what I'll say.
Amen to that. Absolutely. Thank you for the honor and privilege to be with you. I really am so humbled that you chose me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everyone. And we will see you next week for our second in our series for Women's History Month. Thank you so much for joining us.